Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 40k Fireside podcast. I'm David Gaylord, and I'm joined by my good friend Vic Vijay. Together, we discuss 40k and the meta from our perspective, along with events we've recently been to and those that have got coming up. So come on down to the Fireside and listen.
Welcome back to 40k Fireside, everyone. It's been a little bit of a hiatus for me and Dave, and we've got lots of messages come through about people asking us when's the next episode of 40k Fireside, and we're really happy to be bringing episode 11 to you. A lot has happened in the world of 40k. We're coming towards the end of the Nephilim season. We're moving into preparing for the largest event in the world, the LVO. And both me and Dave are going into that, really trying to put our heart and soul into doing as best as we can at the event. And this episode is going to be talking about not only the LVO, but also talking about the Nottingham Super Major, which was the second largest UK Super Major that's happened this season. And me and Dave both had a really great time at that event. And we'll run through our games, run through some of our key highlights and how it affects our preparation for the Las Vegas Open.
Yeah, and just before we crack into those two subjects, we've got a little bit of groundwork to cover, a little bit of house cleaning. So we're going to be chatting a little bit about the podcast. So in 2022, Vic and I were playing the Bournemouth tournament, and with both my fiance and Vic's wife there, we were sort of thinking, it'd be cool to maybe start a podcast. Like, would you be interested in doing it? And I remember Vic at dinner saying like, I'd be really into it. And then I think a few months later or something, I just said, hey, look, there's no reason why we can't do it. And I'll sort out trying to figure out how to create, and cut up audio files and host them on YouTube and get all that stuff sorted. And if I were to do that, would you be keen to do it? And Vic was like, hell yeah, let's try and do it. And that's kind of how it had been created. And I don't think we haven't struggled doing it. And for me, it's been a huge positive part of my relationship with 40k is doing the podcast with you, of course, man. And I think 2020 has been an absolutely great start for us. We've had some kind of, to me at least, these numbers are kind of crazy. We had 1,700 unique listeners at, I think, on episode 10, which to me, if you just think about 1,700 people actually listening to what you have to say is, kind of crazy. And that's just on our Spotify and our non-YouTube platforms. So look, Vic and I, we really enjoy doing it, and we definitely want to be expanding it and bringing out and always improving the podcast and coming up with new ideas with how to produce content. But to be honest with you, the content just kind of produces itself, doesn't it, man?
Yeah, we go to events regularly, and honestly, we're really tuned into competitive 40k at the moment. We're planning on continuing that into 2023. And as we go to events and as we continue to develop as players, me and Dave were chatting just before this that both of us have grown so much as 40k players over this year, both technically and with our attitude to the game. And that can only continue as long as we keep surrounding ourselves with the great people we have. And this podcast only adds to that. So hopefully 2023 will continue to just be kind of a steady journey like what we've been doing now. I would love to get a few more guests onto the show. The episode with Anthony Vanella was amazing. And, if we can grab some of the other top players, all of them are so enigmatic and charismatic on videos. We can create some really great content that hopefully we can share with our listeners.
Yeah, for sure. And both of us will be going to WTC in 2023. So I think that's going to be a really awesome peak for the podcast as well. There's so much content we can create around there. I'll be playing with Team New Zealand, which is going to be at WTC. I'm super stoked for it. I know I've said this previously that representing my country for WTC is going to be probably the proudest moment for me playing Warhammer. We've got a great bunch of guys coming across. We've got 2 people from the UK, and we've been playing some online tournaments, and it's been an absolutely fantastic time. So WTC for myself, New Zealand, WTC for Vic, of course, with Team England, which
stacked.
Your lineup looks pretty stacked as well. I gotta admit. So I think that's going to be a great opportunity as well. And we're going to try and I really want to try and do some more on-site recordings. So perhaps we can try and bring some recording stuff there. We did a little bit of it at Nottingham, and you guys are going to taste that of an absolutely epic moment between in one of Vic's final rounds. So that's fantastic. Aside from that, I would like to announce that myself and Anthony have put together the winner for a steak dinner, or if it's a 20-0, neither of us are sure, but I'm pretty sure I'm probably just going to be ending up buying Anthony the steak dinner anyway. So Anthony and I are working with War Games Live. Joe from War Games Live, the absolute legend who travels around in his camper van casting 40k for a living. The guy is such a nice bloke, and actually had a recent interview with Steve Joel. If you want to learn more about him, definitely check out that podcast. I think Nurgle Matthew originally suggested, hey, do you think it would be a good idea to get War Games Live to cover this? And from there, it just really took off. So we've been exchanging details, and Anthony and I are going to be running an exhibition game for charity on the Thursday before Las Vegas Open. So that's just the day before. So if you're looking for some content to consume, you don't have to donate or anything, but we are donating to Canines for Veterans charity. That's a local charity at Las Vegas. If you want to donate, go ahead. It's all the support is great. It'll be going straight to charity. But otherwise, come and check out the game. It'll be me playing Thousand Suns versus Anthony playing Chaos Space Marines the day before Las Vegas Open. So it'd be great to check it out.
That's going to be an awesome game. And I'm looking forward to seeing it. I'll be there in person with you, Dave, watching. Yeah, supporting Anthony all the way. Come on, Anthony.
Yes. So, and then, Vic, you have to buy me the steak dinner for supporting Anthony.
You can have all the steak dinners you want, no problem.
Alrighty, and we're back to talk about the Nottingham Super Major. That was just about 400 players, so it was kind of crazy. I don't think anyone expected it to be that large. I thought it was going to be about 180 players, but it turned out that everyone was really excited to play their army one last time before the whole game changed, perhaps. So that was interesting. It's a little bit of a different tournament because it cuts to the top four. Well, all of Zach's tournaments, for the most part, the 2 days all cut to the top four, but there were going to be a projected 11 to 12 undefeated players in the field. So the field to get into the top four was extremely competitive. You needed to score 100s and drop very little points overall to get into the top four. So it created an interesting dilemma. It, to me, limited the amount of viable army choices you could take to potentially place well and get into the top four of the tournament. But it was a blast all around. The event venue was great, and everything, of course, ran super smoothly, like we've come to expect for the UKTC. What was your impression of the event as a whole, Vic?
I thought it's mental that it has 390 players. That's an absolutely huge event. And, it's quite interesting because at this stage of the ITC season, as we come to the finale, to have a super major just before the end, which is this large, is extremely impactful for trying to end the season with a high ITC ranking, which I think is actually pretty important for both of us. It's something that we're really aiming for. And we kind of went into this event and in first and fourth in the ITC. And there were a lot of points up for grab in this to put us in good stead for LVO. So going into the event, I think we both had our goals. We wanted to try and get close to 4150, maybe even make the top cut. So this was a really important event, and as to be expected with UKTC events now, they are run impeccably all the way through. It feels so smooth, like the transition and timing between rounds and everything. Yeah. I really enjoyed the event. There was an incredible atmosphere. I think everyone's got a very positive vibe about them. And I'm really happy to see that the fact that we were using the old Nephilim rules and none of the new rules didn't actually affect the experience for anyone there.
I would definitely, look, contrary to obviously everything that's happened with LVO, I think that everyone in the UK was like, cool, let's end the season on the terrain and mission pack that we've been playing the whole time. Yep. It makes a lot of logical sense. And actually, I think that kind of added to the flavour of the event in a lot of ways. It was kind of like one last outing, so to speak. So on that last outing, of course, Vic and I both played Thousand Suns and Flamers. And actually, we played the closest lists I think we've ever played, right? Did we have identical lists? Or did we have...
Literally identical. Maybe one or two spells were different. So it's absolutely the same list.
Exactly, yeah. And I think my biggest takeaway for the event and thinking about LVO and what we're going to submit for LVO is actually, this army is so much fun to play. It is by far the funnest army I've ever played in my life. It's technically rewarding. It has an enormous skill ceiling that continues to reward you the better you play. Where some armies, even if you do play and maximize your skill leverage, you don't necessarily get that much out of it. But Thousand Suns feels the exact opposite of that. The better you play, the more nuanced and technical abilities you can get off. It really rewards that. So for me, it's so much fun. I just love casting spells as well. It's like you're sort of playing like a rigged lottery every time you get to your psychic phase. You're like, yes, what can I concoct now? Bolt of Change you for 8 mortal wounds. Like,
oh man, and it can be really swingy at times.
Yeah.
Gosh, but I mean, just to briefly run through our list is very really simple. Just Ahriman on a disc, Exalted Sorcerer on a disc, Infernal Master. The army's set in a battalion with 6 units of 5 Rubric Marines. Every unit has a Soul Reaper cannon in it and no Warp Flamers anywhere. Then we've got 10 Scarab Occult Terminators fully loaded out with Soul Reaper cannons and missiles. We've got 1 Chaos Rhino. And then we've got a Vanguard detachment of Chaos Demons. These are Tzeentch Demons with a Change Caster, which is the little herald on foot. And we've got 553 of Flamers to round out the list at 2,000 points.
Yeah, so it's funny that this is the kind of culmination of Vic and I have both played this army for, I guess, a month and a bit now, and we've slowly converged on one list that we've both thought was ideal for Nottingham. Subsequently, it has changed a little bit, but I just thought it was an interesting take that I think it doesn't happen very often in Warhammer 40k compared to some games like Magic the Gathering, for example, where teammates play identical lists. And for me, it makes so much sense, right? Like we both converge and agree on the important parts of the army, and throughout 2,000 points, you can change a lot of things. So I just thought that was a cool thing to point out. Yeah.
Yeah, and Dave, I think you had an incredible run at this tournament. Really, really successful all the way through. And Dave did do better than me at this one. I ended up going 4 wins and a draw. And Dave, on your end?
Yeah, I went 5-1. So I made the top cut and came 4th overall. I think leading up to the top cut, I played Tau twice, both with Sunshark Bombers and Medalists. And I played Harlequins once. And then I played Aldari twice as well. So, I mean, 3 out of 5 of my games, I would say, had good medalists. And yeah, a lot of them were interesting games. Like I had some lovely games. I was staying with Jokkel Johansson from Team Iceland, who's a good friend of mine. And I ended up playing against Michael Hooper, who's a Team Iceland player on Tau. So that was a really fun game. And then I ended up playing against Eric, a former Team USA player, also on Tau on my final round, which was it was a great game. Let's just say he went Montcar and things were interesting to say the least.
I was there for that moment. I think you asked him you're Cao Yon, right? And he was like, no, Montcar just put a Riptide right next to your whole army.
And he went first as well. And Sunshark bombed me on turn 1 and then teleported his Cold Star into my army with his Crisis Suits, and then Fire and Faded his Riptide so that he could charge my Ahriman in my deployment zone on turn 2. So I was on cleanup duty the entire game. But yeah, it was a great game. I had a little bit of a good run in terms of the armies that I played against, so I was able to get some pretty high scores. And I think a lot of my opponents kind of also realized that if they played passively that they were just going to lose, so it forced them into the situation where they had to play aggressively, and allowed me to get a lot of points on something like Sorcerer's Prowess, where you normally wouldn't get as many points. And so it kind of allowed me to get a run that actually made it feasible for me to get into the top 4. But what about you, Vic? Did you have any in particular games that you were really stressing over?
So I was on course to make the top 4. And I hit a little speed bump on round 5. But on my way to round 5, I ended up playing 2 mirror matches against Thousand Suns and Flamers. I took a lot away from these games because both of these players, so one was Chris Taylor and the other one was Nathan Cocker, they were both really good players. And it made me just realize that, the skill level of the general kind of group of players that I'm playing against is so high now, and it seems to kind of keep improving at each tournament I go to. And both Chris and Nathan, they both played really well all the way through. And then somehow, at some point, I ended up winning those games. And I still don't know what happened. I still don't know what, like, I know there were a few, like, points, like, against Nathan, he, like, made his aggro push, and I managed to push through 2 Infernal Gateways, and
nice.
one of them was 3 Mortal Wounds, and the other was D3, and 3 characters died off it.
This was the mirror matchup where you killed 3 of his sorcerers over 2 Infernal Gateways, right?
That was
That's
wild.
crazy.
So, obviously, that's, like, a swing, but it still doesn't account for the entire game. So it made me leave those games thinking that actually it's the player, like there's such a high skill ceiling with this army that just kind of being consistently correct with your moves does add up a lot in the score when you look at it at the end.
Yeah.
And so I had those 2 great games. I had a couple of other games as well, but then it culminated in an incredible game against Liam Calvert, who's the nicest guy you'll ever meet. I never played him before, and he told me, you know what, I've never played against named players up until now, but I've seen Liam do well at every single tournament he goes to. He's always up there, but we've never actually met and played. And Liam was playing Creations of Bile. Out of all of my games this tournament, this was the one I was most confident about going into. I looked at it and thought, right, he has to take 2 kill secondaries. He's going to have to go no prisoners, and he's going to have to go for the specimens for the spider, which is the Creations of Bile secondary, which means he is running at me. Which means that as long as I set up in a position where I hit him for 2 turns, he's not going to have an army left. Now, we played out the first 2 turns of this game, and this is exactly what happened. He ran at me. I isolated parts of his army and tried to kill them. I missed 75% of my spells. Did 1 mortal wound on any spell which required a D3, and I suddenly had this entire army just running into me, and I had to spend the whole game grinding out points. Liam, by the time we got to turn 4, was well and truly ahead. I'd made a little positioning error, and he managed to pick up my Exalted Sorcerer and Ahriman in one go, because I assumed his Demon Prince would die. And his Demon Prince did not die, and he just, like, killed both of them in one go.
Just smashed through both of them, yeah.
And then I was like, right, so I've got 2 units left. Like, I'm going to have to play this with 2 units.
Not ideal.
Managed to make a few little charges, grab a couple of points here, and then it ended up on the final turn of the game where Liam technically was going to win by 2 points. We'd like counted out the score. He was going to win by 2 points, and we were a dead draw, so he only needs 1 of those 2 points to win. And those points were Wrath of Magnus points. So one of the points was if he casts a single blessing spell, and one of the points was if he casts a single Witchfire spell. So I have... Oh, have you got it? Have you got the video?
Sorry. Speaking of which, I didn't. No. I was on my phone trying to bring it up. So this is my favorite part of the whole tournament. So I'm just gonna let it speak for itself. But this is when Vic and his opponent were trying to figure out how he could win, and his opponent just needed to cast a single spell or get a single spell off. But Vic had plenty of denies. So I'm gonna play the recording just so Vic and I can hear it. But I'm gonna edit it into the actual thing in here in a second. Alright, this is the last cast for the game in Vic's game. This will be for the draw. We're casting about Bolt of Change. Vic's already denied the previous spell on an 11 to deny. And denied 3d6 with the spell. Here we go. Here we go. It's coming in the box. Here we go. It's an 8.
Oh, no.
Vic needs
It's a 9.
Vic needs a 10 to deny.
Just a 10. That's a 6.
Oh wait, 1 out of the box. Doesn't count. Doesn't count. 1 in out of the box.
I need a 4.
We need a 4 plus. So good. Oh god, that was so good.
I love that.
Everyone was just waiting because I mean, what happened is you rolled the 2 dice, but one of them was a 6, but it was not. It was in the box, and there was 1 dice that wasn't in.
What was the one on the floor, Dave?
The one on the floor was a 1. Yes. I can confirm. But we all agreed that if it wasn't in the box, it didn't count. So you got that. It was just straight up. That was the most straight up 4-up I think I've ever seen. That was absolutely great, man. I for me, it's times like that where you kind of think back and you think those are the times about Warhammer I'll probably remember like some of the most, like it was
Leah was a good sport about it. We ended up with an 86-86 draw, which meant I ended up coming in 11th place, which was actually really good. That gave me another 25-30 ITC points.
Yeah, so there wasn't that much difference between going 5-0 and going 4-0-1, right? Because I mean, you might have gotten like at the bottom of the 5-0s or something. So it wasn't like maybe it was like 4 or 5 places
between
difference.
11th place and your 4th place. It was 8 points. The ITC
exactly
difference,
right.
which is they're both really good scores. And
Given that was kicking off, I was preparing to play for the top four.
Yes, yeah.
And the top four was myself, Mike Porter, who ended up winning the tournament, James Marsden, and the Team Ireland, Northern Ireland player on Sisters. I figured his name. Peter, and funnily enough, I'd actually previously played him in an online team event, although I subsequently found out later. So it was me versus Porter. I think undisputably probably the two most winningest players in the top four, but we clashed early into the semi-finals. And this game was probably the best example of a brain fart, and probably where you need to, and this is a good kick up the bum for me, have your secondaries done on a piece of paper, probably for every matchup before a big tournament. So what I did was, Mike and I both knew it was a good matchup for me. Mike is playing a Shadow Seer, so I can take Wrath of Magnus. Didn't have any maledictions, so Wrath of Magnus was more or less a 15 for me. And he needed to, it was the Scouring as well, so a good mission for him overall. But he needed to basically take behind enemy lines and deadly performance to score points. Otherwise, his points weren't going to be at my level, given that I could probably just sit on my half of the board and do nothing the whole game and play a passive game. And that was my game plan going into it. I was just going to hold 2 and get 8-8-8, or try to at least. Or if he was going to 4 me, I would try and 4 him on the other side and passively score points. So I took Wrath of Magnus, I took Sorcerer's Prowess, I took Wrath of Magnus, I took Banners, and then I took Warp Ritual. Mm-hmm. And after the game, Mike said, yeah, I was really surprised you didn't take Sorcerer's Prowess, because when you said you took Banners and Warp Ritual, I actually thought to myself, wow, I've actually got a chance to win this now. And so the end score was 73-69, but I could have reduced his points. So it was kind of like a 3 to 4 point loss. And I scored 7 on Warp Ritual and 6 on Banners, and I had the bottom of the turn as well. So the reason why I lost was because if I had taken Sorcerer's Prowess, I would have been at about 15 points for that. And with bottom of the turn, I would have been able to control, probably getting either 4 to 6 points on the bottom of the turn for Sorcerer's Prowess. So it would have been a 15er. And in a position where you're losing by potentially 3 to 4 points, obviously a 15er is absolutely massive. So yeah, it was a bit... look, other than that, it was a really fun game. Mike's a lovely player to play against. We had a great time. Although he slightly cheated because his daughter was there and I didn't really want to play super hard. No, it was lovely anyway. Mike's obviously, everyone knows him on Harlequins at the moment. But it was a little bit disappointing to make a blunder like that, I think. But all very good learnings going into LVO. Like, it was a great practice game. Like, nothing kind of replicates the tournament environment quite like playing at the tournament environment. Like, when you're under pressure, you have played a lot of games. So to get really good practice games like that, to get really good practice games like that before LVO is really nice. Like, getting to play against Quins a couple of times, Tau a couple of times, when I'm not in the comfort of my own home, playing on TTS or something like that under different conditions is. Yeah, it's really good, and it's such a good tournament to have just before LVO. Yeah,
awesome, man. And you kept it to a really close game, and you also learned a big lesson from it. You took your ITC points. Everything works out for the best.
It does, yeah. And I think going into this, we were both you and I were both thinking like a 5-0, like happy with it, right? It'll be a good amount of points.
To be honest, a high scoring 4-1 is very similar points to a 5-0 in this tournament.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, it was a great weekend overall. Shared an Airbnb with a good friend of mine as well, and then didn't even have to go back on Sunday night, so could go back on Monday as well. Not super stressed out. Yeah.
Awesome. So, that's our Nottingham experience, Nottingham Super Major, and that's the last UKTC events for this ITC season. So. Mm-hmm. This is all culminating in us going to the LVO, and maybe we should put some more jazz music on and come back for a bit of LVO chat.
Go and jazzify it. See you guys in a bit.
Hey guys, welcome welcome back to the final section. We're going to be talking about the LVO, and in this section we're going to try and... We don't have lists yet. That's the main thing. We have
All
our
we
lists.
have is the factions.
We have the factions, and we have the majority of players who are registered for the event. We're going to go through a little breakdown of, what are the top players that are there, what are the armies that are being run generally, what factions are the most popular. And then we're going to try and touch on, where we stand, how confident we feel about the tournament, how we think we're going to do, what we're bringing, and, maybe we're going to pick the kind of top 8 factions that we might see, maybe a couple of players as well to keep an eye out for.
For sure. Yeah, so I think recently today they published on Reddit, I can see the total army results, which of course aren't completely correct because some people will list their factions differently. I, for example, put my army as Chaos because I am mixed Chaos, not Thousand Sons. So this post is out of 966 players, and I think it'll be close to 1,000 players. There are still some people registering late, so it'd be nice if that wasn't the case. But yeah, let's dive into it. So at the top, I think we've probably got Eldari at 55. That's a lot. Votan at 53. That is a lot. That's
a lot.
very
Wow.
surprising. 53 Votan. And we've got 52 Tyranids, so more Votan than Tyranids. That's very interesting. That's definitely not the case in the UK. Votan is very unpopular in the UK. 52 Tau, so equal amount of Tyranids and Tau. Okay, I think that's probably what we would expect as well.
Yeah.
43 Custodes. That seems like a lot as well. 46 Chaos Demons, which I thought was actually on the low side. I thought Chaos Demons would be one of the, if not maybe the most popular faction. 36 Imperial Knights, 34 Necrons, so obviously Necrons have slipped. 33 Sisters, so that's interesting. Orcs, there's just as many Orc players as there are roughly Necrons and Sisters players, so I think a big showing for that. Renegade Knights, so Chaos Knights coming in at 31 there as well, so roughly those factions are represented the same. Guard doesn't really matter. Thousand Sons were coming in at, I'm going to say, roughly 30 as well. So Thousand Sons at the bottom of the pack in terms of the top 8 most popular armies. There's more Death Guard than Thousand Sons. Chaos Space Marines, if you count them all up, look to be at above 30 actually, because Emperor's Children at 16, so... I would say actually Chaos Space Marines coming at a very healthy number, about 45 probably. So yeah, so the top armies looking like, in terms of what people are bringing, Eldari, Votan, Tau, Tyranids, and then Chaos Demons, and then Knights combined represent actually the largest amount. If you combine Chaos Knights and Imperial Knights, that's the most popular faction. And of course, the Space Marines super faction is 144 players, 36 of which are Blood
That's
Angels.
a lot of Blood Angels, man.
That's
Wow.
a lot of Blood Angels, isn't it?
Yeah, and we also only have 21 Harlequins, so
Yes.
they
Good
always have
catch.
a low representation, and 21 is probably where you'd expect it. I think probably the most surprising number is the low number of Thousand Sons, potentially Thousand Sons Flamers list, because a number of those Thousand Sons lists are going to be pure Thousand Sons.
Yep.
So, yeah, that's showing some differences in meta. But
Were there
I
any
think,
standouts for you in particular?
for me, I think the fact that Tau and Tyranids are the two very popular ones, are real big standouts in terms of the meta, because I put Tau and Tyranids as strong as the Thousand Sons and Flamers list in terms of their power at this event. And then obviously we've got Harlequins as well. But I'd say the Harlequins probably a little bit less strong in LVO terrain than the FLG terrain. I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah. And then Blood Angels being 36, being the most popular Space Marine faction. I think
Kind of
makes a lot
terrifying.
sense.
It's almost twice as much as any other Space Marine faction.
That's true, yeah. Although they still die like all Space Marines die.
They still die like all Space Marines, but like one of them kills anything.
Yeah. So I think given these numbers, assuming that they stay the same throughout the event, which we know is not correct, obviously there's going to be more Tau. As a total percentage of players in your bracket, we expect Tau, Tyranids, and probably Votan, and probably Demons and Blood Angels to become more popular if you're playing in the, say, 3-0 bracket or the 4-0, 5-0 bracket. How do you think Thousand Sons are looking? How do you think we're looking in terms of our list? By the way, spoiler, guys, Vic and I are taking basically the exact same list to LVO that we submitted for Nottingham, of course.
Well, we have some differences now. I've made some changes, bro.
Whoa!
I know. So basically, I won Leicester, right? And I had a great time at Leicester using the Fate Skimmer instead of the Changecaster. And I didn't have such a great time playing the Rhino at Nottingham. So I've dropped the Rhino, got my Fate Skimmer back in. It buys a few more points for the army as well. So I've got 2 of these Warp Flamer Rubric Marine squads in. And actually, I've really liked them on LVO terrain because... my takeaway from this is in UKTC I love to play passively, and in the LVO terrain there's got to be an element of aggression involved, in my opinion. I know we and Dave are diverging in opposite directions now, but I've become more of an aggressive player on this LVO terrain in my practice. So
bizarre.
I know, right?
Yeah, it's so bizarre. So guys, context into Vic and I's practice. I think so. I was playing quite a bit over Christmas, New Year's, leading up to LVO. And of course, with the, I'm going to say it for what it is. It's a complete shit show in terms of the decisions and potential decisions around whether or not to have the balanced data slate in or out. It was pretty. I know I'm not being over dramatic, but it was very frustrating as a player to not know what the rules were basically a week before the submission or 2 to 3 weeks, and not knowing it can be changing. So. I was practicing a ton of other lists, but basically the funniest part is that I have been an extremely aggressive player over the season, and ever since I've been practicing more on LVO terrain and Thousand Suns, I've become like a zenful passive player, and the way I approach lots of matchups are sort of like, I'm just gonna do my thing on my side of the board, and a comfortable little 3 or 4 point win, and I'm just gonna be at peace in my fortress, and people have to come and break my fortress down. So it's funny because Vic is obviously has been a much more passive player and plays it better than me throughout the season. So it's kind of funny how we both have come to 2 different polar opposites. But I think when you think about Thousand Suns, it just goes to show that there are so many ways of playing it that perhaps it's more a symptom of Vic, you're discovering a way of playing it that you previously weren't using a lot, and I'm doing the exact same. So I'm finding you can play passive, which is something I'm not used to, so I'm kind of leaning on that, and you're finding you can play aggressive, which is something maybe you're not as used to, so you're kind of leaning into that as well.
Makes sense. And I think, with these kind of different play styles that you're not used to, you also kind of develop and learn the little tricks. Like, I've learned a lot about the correct way to perform alpha strikes with Thousand Suns. I think in my head, I was not doing alpha strikes. I wasn't really being aggressive. And then when I did make my push, I was often throwing, 2 characters plus the Terminators in. Mm-hmm. When actually sometimes it's much better to throw just the Terminators and screen much further forward with another unit. And lots of little tricks like this. So I'm starting to work out a lot of tiny tactics, which is probably a weaker part of my game, the little bits of tactics. Overall strategy, I usually get it right. Like, this is the place where I have to attack. This is the position to be in. This is the way my movement should transition over 2 or 3 turns. Mm-hmm. But actually, the tactics of this is how you move block someone and stop them from attacking certain parts of armies doesn't tend to come as intuitively to me. So I've learned a lot over the last few days.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, and the army's got so many like little different tricks and tactics that you can pull out as well, right? So me, I think we're well positioned. I think the meta of Tyranids and Tau being very popular is good for us. I think those matchups are, if they don't have any Harpies, I think Tyranids is favoured. I think Tau is favoured. I think that Votan is definitely favoured, so I'm really happy to see large Votan numbers there, that's for sure. Blood Angels is a bit worrying, that's for sure, depending on what mission you catch them on. Knights being very popular, I think is great for us. Chaos Demons being quite popular, I think is great for us as well. They can interact with us a little bit, but it's not too big of a deal. And yeah, I think overall, I think the army's in a good position. I don't know. Do you have anything that you're really? Do you think overall, if you could submit your army today based on what you saw, would you pick the same thing, Vic?
I mean, I'm not very optimistic about the meta in general. I think over a very large tournament like this, I think there's going to be a lot of tight games against top players playing different factions with this. So I don't think from a list perspective, we've necessarily picked for a good list advantage, because the Tau game is like close to 50-50 in my opinion. I know there's loads of ways both players can play that game. And then the Kraken game feels a little bit difficult, so you're on the
Yep.
back foot a little bit. The Votan game and the Knights game, it's amazing. If I can play 8 rounds of Votan, I'll be really happy. But realistically, that's not going to be the case. But those two being good is brilliant. The terrain format not favoring Harlequins too much is also brilliant. The big problems are the Kraken and the Blood Angels. Those kinds of like really aggressive, fast-moving melee armies. Kraken obviously much faster. Blood Angels obviously hitting much harder. The big issue with Blood Angels is they also score quite aggressively.
Yeah.
If they make multiple charges, especially out of Deep Strike with Death's Company units, it can be a real problem. And I think, you know, there's a chance that you just suddenly lose games. And that's the bit that's scary to go into when the terrain format is like this. In UKTC, you can build your entire game plan around a fixed terrain format. In this, kind of player-placed with different terrain maps, and even on the best terrain map, it's quite a weak terrain set in my opinion. It can be really swingy.
That's interesting. So do you think what would you rather have submitted if you could submit today now? Would you go with Tau?
I would probably still say with the Thousand Suns. I think it gives me the best chance of consistency, but I don't think I'm going into this. If I could, I would run Kraken, personally.
Really?
Yeah. If I could just go back and start again, I would run Kraken.
That's interesting, because Kraken does not have a very good game into Tau.
Into Tau, you don't think so?
No.
I think it's
matchup
swingy.
is... Yeah, so I've been playing this matchup specifically quite a bit, and that matchup is against a great Tau player. You're basically putting everything on the line and hoping to go first every time.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Interesting. You just lose stuff too quickly.
You just get blown off the board, yeah.
Fair.
That's very tough.
Symptom of the terrain, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of how the matchup has been, actually, because, before that we had Warriors, which were, Leviathan Warriors, which changed the matchup considerably. But, Tau fast enough and can touch into enough ruins where they can see right into everything. So that's I think, is a downfall for Kraken as well.
Right.
And I think if I was a Blood Angels player, I would be worried about the amount of, demons, custodes, Tyranids, Votan, those, and Chaos Space Marines. There's not too much Chaos Space Marines.
Tau can be awkward for Blood Angels.
Well, of course, right? So that's
-2 to charge.
Yeah, so when I look at the matchups that are bad for Thousand Suns, I also think that those armies have many more bad matchups. So when I think about going deep into the tournament, they should be hitting their worst matchups more often than I should. But of course, we all know that in a tournament like LVO, you can't have an army that is great into everything. It just simply doesn't exist. There are going to be conditions that you can lose, and to win or do very well at a tournament like LVO, you need to have a good run. Like, you can't be going second, and you can't have multiple unfavorable situations going against you in a tournament so large. It just doesn't work out that way. It's like you need a good run to do very well in any significant tournament, right?
That's a very positive mindset, Dave. I like that, and that has actually calmed me down quite a lot. I think a part of this is putting too much pressure on myself to try. Like, we're right at the end, right?
Yeah.
And, if we don't do well here, does that mean that everything we've achieved over the past year means nothing? No, it doesn't, right?
Of course not, right?
So,
I mean, at the end of the day, I also wanted to play an army that I thought was going to be really fun. So I was flip-flopping a lot between Kraken and Thousand Suns, especially because some of the rulings in the FAQ that Frontline Gaming had released were very unfavorable to Thousand Suns and, quite frankly, completely wrong. So then I was going back towards Kraken, and even when I was thinking, strategically speaking, it would be better for me to play Kraken, I was also thinking, look, do I want to go to Vegas and play and not have the opportunity to play an army I just genuinely enjoy playing? Because it's still going to be about having fun, right? Yeah. So, I'm super glad I picked the army that at the end of the day is going to be strong, but also I'm going to just enjoy slinging some spells, shooting some people, mutating some landscapes.
That's it, man. Let's go. It's going to be an awesome event, I think. And, in terms of like who or what you think is going to do really well at the event, what are your kind of thoughts? What are your predictions?
Ooh, for the top 8? Yeah. I think the top 8 is going to be quite diverse, actually. Mm-hmm. I think there are going to be two... Okay, so I think in the top 8, I think there's going to be an Orc player. I think there are going to be 2 Tau players. I think there's going to be a Thousand Suns and Flamers player, potentially 1 to 2 of those. I think that there will be 1 to 2 of Tyranid players and 1 to 2 of Votan players, depending on how you flex them.
Votan.
So I think,
you think Votan are going to go all the way?
yeah, look, they have the numbers as well, right? They've got a big representation, so I'm cheating a bit based on the statistics, but they have the second largest representation of a single faction. So I think given that, it's very interesting, and I think the Scouring is quite an interesting mission for them, playing into round 6 as well. So yeah, I do think Votan have what it takes to make it into the top 8.
Very interesting. I mean, to give some context going into this event, the ITC top 5 at the moment includes 3 UK players and 2 American players. So we've got me, you, and Mike Porter in 1, 4, and 3 respectively, and then we've got Jack and John in 2 and 5 respectively.
And the points are up in the air right now, right? Like, I genuinely feel after Nottingham, it's anyone in that top 4. Well, John has a few less points than everyone else now, but I feel, and he could even still win the whole ITC. But between us 4, it's gotten closer as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's really, really tight across those. I think John is 70 points behind where I am, which is quite an amount.
Yeah.
But the rest of us are all close. We're within 50 points of each other.
Exactly.
Which is a really, 1 win away the difference. One win completely swings that.
Exactly. And if one of us hits a matchup, or doesn't make top 8, then it's completely out of contention as well. So yeah, it's going to be spicy, right? It's going to be such a fun tournament. We're obviously really looking forward to it. We're stressing out a little bit. What about you? What do you think about in terms of the top 8? Would you change anything there? You got any dark horses, any sleepers that you think might get in?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said with the pairings. I think any really good player here, that has a okay run is gonna make it through to that top 8, and the pairings are the most important thing here. In terms of factions, I think I've got my top factions, which are going to be Tau, Tyranids, Thousand Suns, and Quins. I think those are the 4 strongest armies.
Yep.
But in an event of this size, it's very likely we see some players playing factions which you wouldn't expect, and players you wouldn't expect. New names kind of pop up, and you're like, whoa, look at this guy, he's doing so well. He plays on stream and he's just insanely good. It happened at LGT. All of a sudden we had a guy from France come over. Alexandra just came and killed all of us.
Yep, for sure.
Exactly the same kind of thing is bound to happen in LVO, and these are the stories which make it exciting. When you see round 2, Jack Hofstad's lost here. Oh, round 3 pairing is John Lennon versus David, and David takes them out. That's the exciting
hopefully.
stuff.
So I think you did bring up Jack. Obviously, Jack, I think, just checking it out now, has submitted. He is one of the 36 Blood Angels players. So that is an interesting one for me. I don't think that Blood Angels are going to necessarily be in a favourable matchup when it comes against Tyranids and Tau and Votan. I mean, that's just my gut feeling. Obviously, Jack's a fantastic player, but it's difficult to have those, such large amount of popular factions be kind of against you in some regards. I don't know.
You see, the thing with Blood Angels is that they're also a very strong scoring army.
Right.
Their secondary score is incredible, and they can play some level of primary control by sitting in cover with their 2-up saves and Armor of Content. So I think Jack has probably picked quite well here, especially because he does have experience with Blood Angels, and he's an extremely good player, which is very obvious for everyone. So that I think he has a strong enough army if he gets the right pairings. If he doesn't hit another very technically skilled player on an army that's better than his, he has as good a chance as any of us just to go all the way. So I think good pick from Jack, and then obviously if he hits me or you, he's got a little bit of an advantage in the matchup as well. So
for sure.
He's probably, maybe he's factored that in. You never know.
He could just hit Nassim, and then I'm sorry, but it'll be lights out. It'll be interesting. What I think is going to be interesting as well is looking at the difference in lists that UK players bring on like-for-like factions that the USA players are bringing. Obviously the Tau Sunshark Bomber is probably a staple in most of those Tau lists, but I know a lot of European and UK Tyranid players will be bringing Harpies as well, of course. KME Paris is also bringing that. So, I know that Harpies aren't popular in the meta in the United States, but I think, look, if you're looking at it going into this, you'd want to be playing them.
I just checked. John Lennon hasn't got his faction down.
Hasn't got it down, yep.
I'm not sure, will he take the same thing as Jack? Will he go for Kraken?
Yep.
Not sure. Will he run Harpies?
I think he will be on Tyranids or Kraken. He's got if he takes Tyranids or Kraken, he basically guaranteed wins best Tyranid player for the season over myself, which I've currently got it. But I decided that I didn't really want to play Tyranids.
Nice, fair enough. And obviously we've got Innes as well coming from the UK. We've got Nassim as well, all in
Nassim
the top 10
playing
of the
Tau.
ITC.
I think Innes is potentially looking at Chaos Space Marines, maybe?
No. I think he did end up sticking to Kraken, I think. Oh, is he?
Well, I was talking to Innes at Nottingham.
He was obsessed about these decimators. No, he's on Tyranids.
He's on Tyranids. Good call by Innes. Decimators are popular in Europe as well with WTC, that's why. And then we've got Nassim bringing Tau. We've got Brian Seep playing Orcs, one of those 30 Orc players. I believe Shorten Naden is also on Orcs as well, which I think is definitely a sleeper faction. And then we've got, I must be missing some people, but a lot of Vanguard Tactics team are coming over. Obviously, we've got Mike Border on Harlequins. And then I think we've got a bunch of War Masters are coming over as well. So it's great. I think this is the strongest contingent we've got from the UK ever to come to LVO in terms of raw numbers and then the total amount of top players coming. So I think this is going to be the season, if there was ever going to be one, that it isn't taken out by an American, right? We could bring it back home to the UK.
Come on, we've got three of the top 5. That's more than 2 for the Americans. So hopefully we've got a chance of taking this. At least one of us. That would be amazing.
Exactly. I mean, obviously, I would want nothing more than to have a Fireside final.
Can you imagine?
Could you imagine?
Oh my god, that would just be the most epic finish. Like we would cherish that game for the rest of our lives.
I don't even know how hard I would try, to be honest with you.
Oh my god, we would have to just go like all out, Dave. Like.
I don't know, man. I would just be so happy to be there anyway, so I'd just be like, sure. But look, we're really looking forward to it. We're flying out on the Tuesday, so I think we land in on Wednesday, perhaps. It's going to be great. Look, like I said before, Anthony and I have got the exhibition charity game on the Thursday as well. I think Vic and I will also be practicing on the Thursday beforehand as well. I know they sometimes open up the hall if you're really wanting to get in a few games and on the terrain sets. So if we're around, make sure to come and say hi, especially if you're one of our non-UK or EU listeners that hasn't met us in person. We're obviously both really friendly, so feel free to come on up and have a chat to us and drop your suggestions about what we should change in the podcast, of course.
Amazing, guys. And, that is the end of episode 11. Gosh, that was an awesome episode and an awesome run. Let's see if we can get one more episode out before LVO, but otherwise, it's probably going to be after the LVO. There'll be loads of coverage. I know FLG has a full kind of suite of streaming kind of platforms that they're using.
Yep.
And it's all on Reddit on the Warhammer competitive page, so you can follow along with all of the games. And obviously War Games Live is going to be there for the game with Dave and Anthony, and they'll be covering through the LVO as well.
Awesome. And, obviously we're going to be doing lots more episodes this year. We've got a ton of topics to cover. We've got Data Slave, we've got Arcs of Omen, and we're just going to be keeping it honest. I think that's one thing that Vic and I both kind of enjoy doing, just unapologetically, keeping it honest about what we want to do and compete and try our best. And I think that's why
Thank you for listening.
That's why we've enjoyed it so far.
Vic and I hope you've enjoyed listening.
All right, guys.
Appreciate
Thank you for listening,
feedback.
and we'll catch you at the Fireside next time.
Catch you guys next time.